Hi, good afternoon, and welcome to the latest in the Let's Talk series from Novasco. And this month we're talking about data security. My name is Mal Toner. I'm a solutions architect with Novasco, based in our UK team over in England. So, if we start off with an agenda, we're going to talk about the challenges of data security. We're going to talk about the three phases in dealing with data security, which prevent, detect, and respond. We're going to focus a little bit on, is prevention enough? We're going to talk about the change in compliance picture. I'll try not to mention the dreaded GDPR too much, but we can't talk about compliance these days without addressing it. We're going to talk about some basic action plans that you should bear in mind if you are using cloud services, and we're going to talk about how you deal with things before, during, and after an attack. So let's start. So challenges. What I want to focus on today are the challenges for cloud and on-premise solutions and why they are sometimes the same with nuanced differences. I also want to talk about mobility versus security. It's the dichotomy of everybody's facing these days, which is all my users want to be mobile, they want to be able to work from anywhere, they want to be day extenders working from home, but does that fit in with my security and compliance model? So let's be under no illusion, in today's marketplace, hacking, getting at people's data, whatever you want to call it, is an industrialized and then even in some cases state-sponsored activity. You know, you only have to look at things like Uber's recent hack where, what was it, some 50 million users' data was got to. We didn't know about it for weeks, but they've admitted it now. As an Uber user myself, that's quite worrying because Uber has got some very important pieces of information about me. They've got an app on my phone that can track where I am. They've got my credit card details. They've got my mobile number. They've got my email address. So put all that together, that's quite scary. Earlier this year, it was shown that the US electronic voting system took less than 90 minutes to breach. We have reports coming out says that ransomware is going to cost an average of 11.5 billion for 2019, and we've got, you know, global ransomware on the up as reported by the National Cybersecurity Center. So these things are going to affect us. So what can we do? Well, what we can do is understand why they affect us, and one of the things is understand this is a business to some people. Google making an earning from hacking, you'll see all the nice stuff on the web about being a white hat or an ethical hacker, as they call them. But go onto the dark web and you'll start to see things like shepherds. So shepherds is the term used for people who manage .NET NetBot farms. Yeah, shepherds are offering the services of their farms of .NET bots for $7 an hour. We also see other people selling basic social security information for $1 per user. I apologize, this is an American slide taken from a Cisco presentation, but you know, everything's in dollars, but still the information is as valid whether it be in dollars or pounds. It's this sort of price tag that people are willing to pay for this information. And this is a global cybercrime paradigm. We are seeing this more and more. You don't have to be in America to hack an American system and sell social security or medical records of American patients onto someone else. Yet every time we try to develop a strategy that will fit in with our security model and the adoption of cloud services, we have at the other end of the spectrum those users who have expense accounts and credit cards bringing in shadow IT. We have, you know, people just buying their own Dropbox account, people signing up for their own Office 365, people going on and using their own hosted VoIP solution. And this is a real problem, not only from the respect that if you don't know it's been used, you can't protect against it, but also from the respect we're now seeing more and more of these large commercial organizations use the fact that enterprise mailboxes have been used to register these accounts to go back to those enterprises and say, you as a corporate are using our service and therefore should have an enterprise license rather than this one-off end user license that someone bought on their company expense account or company credit card. So that is a real worry. So is the cloud different? Why is it different? What makes it different? Well, let's build out this slide. Yeah, so first of all, when we're dealing with the cloud, we no longer control the true perimeter. We are allowing users, whether it be our users or third-party users, potentially the ability to access data we put in the cloud from anywhere without any of our standard controls. You know, they don't have to log on to our domain to get at it. They don't have to be on our corporate network to get at it. They can get it from anywhere. Shared access to resources becomes a problem, especially if you're talking about things like DDoS as an example, or if you're talking about loss of control through cloud service providers. You know, if I'm sitting on the same cloud service provider as someone else who just happens to be the target of a DDoS hack, that's going to affect me as much as it's going to affect them. Now, I was never the target, but I've got the consequences of sharing the platform. We've also got legal and contractual matters to think about. You know, are there more complex compliance issues because now we're signing over some of the control to our data to a third-party organization that have to fit into our standards or have to adopt our standards to keep ourselves compliant with our governance rules. And I said I had to mention it, GDPR is coming. It will be with us in a very short period of time. Are we ready for it? So just to give you an idea, the slide you're seeing now is the cloud security paradigm from AWS. So everything in orange below the line is an AWS responsible for the security of. Yeah, so the compute, the storage, the database, the networking, the availability zones, the regions, the edge locations, that's all their responsibility. However, everything above the line remains the customer's responsibility. So the client-side data encryption, the server-side data encryption, the network traffic protection. You can't just rely on AWS doing encrypt at rest on their storage, because encrypting at rest on AWS storage means that you're encrypting with the same key as every other AWS customer. You have to take responsibility for a certain amount of server-side level encryption if you need your data to be encrypted and protected. The operating system, the network and firewall configurations, the platform and applications, and more importantly, the customer content. You know, you cannot blame AWS if PCI credit card information is stolen off the platform when it shouldn't have been there in the first place. Now, to compare and contrast this, if we go to the other big cloud service provider, Microsoft, we see a very similar tack from them. They'd like to break it down into whether it's an on-prem solution. So Microsoft support on-prem solutions, Exchange, SQL, Active Directory. And in those environments, the responsibility purely and solely lies with you, the end user, the customer. But when we go into infrastructure as a service, then a few things start to blur. The physical security of the data center and the hosts now becomes the cloud providers. The host infrastructure becomes a joint responsibility. The networking controls becomes a joint responsibility, but everything above that is still 100% an end user customer responsibility. Move into platform, a few things become a shared responsibility now. Yeah, so everything network down is the cloud supplier's responsibility. Application and identity is a joint responsibility, but client-side security and data classification always stays with the user. Move into software as a service. So now we're into tool sets like Dynamics Online. Data classification and accountability, your responsibility. Endpoint protection, your responsibility. Identity management, it's mixed. And it's mixed for a very simple reason. They'll give you the user accounts and the roles to apply to the user accounts, but it's your responsibility to make sure that you apply the right role to the right user account. So this slide really talks about the before, during, and after process. So what should we be doing before we get hacked, during the hack process, and after we understand we've been hacked? What are the standard things we should look at? So before, well, number one, before, discover what do I need to protect. 90% of CIOs I talk to hear someone in IT refer to that their business critical app is backed up and secure every 4 hours, and believe that is the SLA on all data in the business, because if we're doing it for one, surely we're doing it for all. So understand what needs to protect, how critical it is and when it's protected, and understand that process. Most importantly, educate your users. Not only educate them that the attack might happen, but educate them how to spot the attack. Educate them that if something funny happens, and if they get a funny email and they double click it and then realize, oh no, I shouldn't have double clicked that, and close it down, they're not going to end up sacked when they tell you they've done it. The quicker they tell you, the quicker you can nip it in the bud. So don't make them scared of the organization, make them a tool of the organization to understand when things go wrong. And protect. Do your damnedest. And I say your damnedest, do your damnedest to protect your system. Take all the standard things you can. Only use HTTPS on any websites you put out there. Always put firewalls in place. If possible, if you're going into the mobility marketplace, move as many of your security services into a cloud type model as you can, so that you can have the same amount of web filtering, whether I'm web browsing from the corporate network or web browsing on a corporate device from home. So think about how you protect. I said at the start, do your damnedest, and that is because I don't think you ever will 100% protect you. It is not a case of if you're going to get hacked, it is more a case of when you're going to get hacked and dealing with it when you get hacked. So start up front. Think about security events that I should be monitoring to make sure that if these things throw an anomalous set of stats, I know something's wrong. So account lockouts is a good one. If my accounts are on average locking out once a month, and I'm getting 4 lockouts a month because people forget passwords, and then suddenly I get 40 in a day, then I start to worry about brute force attacks. Field administrator authorization events, file systems getting full, reboot events, network traffic anomalies, time sync errors, configuration change events. Yeah, these are all things that can help you understand maybe something weird is going on. And as soon as you understand it might be going on, then you start inspecting to see what could be going on. What do I do during an attack? Well, first of all, detect how the attack could come in. Detect how you will use your cloud services to make sure that you can do things. 100-day average breach detections on most CSPs. Block. Once you know that it is happening, block it from getting any further. You know, the biggest one you can think of this is recently the ransomware hit inside the NHS across the UK, where the simplest response was block it by switching off. Disconnect the internet, it's already got in, switch off the machines that may have it and are spreading it or could receive it and therefore spread it on. And alert. Make sure you alert the relevant personnel within inside your organization. Now, this is about alerting people in the company something is going on. Please bear with us. We're going to shut some stuff down. It's going to have an effect on the business, but the effect on the business would be greater if we didn't take this action to the risk that we're seeing. The key thing to understand here is that just because you're being attacked on one front doesn't mean that you're not going to get attacked on another front. Just because you're seeing a DDoS attack doesn't mean that somewhere in the background someone is sneaking in to do an SQL injection on your website and steal a lot of data. And if you think that sounds weird, talk to TalkTalk. That's exactly what happened with them. They had a massive DDoS attack, and whilst they were working on that DDoS attack, they effectively had a pincer movement of someone coming in through a back door and doing an SQL injection to get the data. So after the attack, what are the steps after the attack? Well, first of all, analyze what the attack did and therefore how you can protect yourself from it in the future. Inform the relevant regulatory bodies. Again, GDPR is going to be mentioned here. It's mentioned at least once more in the slide deck. I apologize, but you have under GDPR's new rule sets a responsibility within 72 hours to inform the relevant regulatory bodies. Not like Uber, who took X number of days. You've got 72 defined hours to do that. and remediate where you can. So once you've understood how it could go wrong, you've then informed somebody that something went wrong, and your next step is to do your best to make sure it can't go wrong again. Yeah? So if you've been attacked on one front, close that door. Find a way to stop it happening in the future. Compliance is an ever-changing landscape. I've already mentioned GDPR coming up. Can you confirm your data is contained in the relevant location it needs to be for your organization? You know, we've got some organizations who are EU only, some organizations are UK only. I've even come across some medical organizations that are England only. How do you ensure full erasure of data at the end of a contract? So if you're using a software as a service, if you're using an infrastructure as a service platform, in fact, one of my clients recently was doing this before they migrated to another provider. When they left, they basically said, right, how do we know that now we've migrated all our data off your shared storage platform, it can't be retrieved? You know, can you do a disk wipe process? And they went, no, we can't, because your disk spindles are shared across multiple customers. So I can't do an overwrite wipe because there's just no way to do it. So how robust is that cloud service provider's platform? And indeed, how robust is their backup strategy? Is it their responsibility to give you a backup strategy? Go back to the couple of paradigms I showed earlier on, the AWS and the Azure one. Was backup even mentioned? Does Office 365 include backup? No. Does it include a certain amount of data integrity? Yes. Does it include a certain amount of data recovery? Yes. But full backup? No. So what's my availability of data, or indeed, what's my availability to get to my cloud service provider if they're hosting another client who's the target of a DDoS attack? I think it was earlier this year, where there was a massive DNS attack in America that actually brought down quite a few hosting providers and websites because they relied on that DNS server. They weren't going after those individual websites or those individual hosting partners. They were going after someone else that was on that DNS server. So before an attack happens, the most important thing to understand is, what have I got? Where is it? How can I put as good measures as I can? And when I say as I can, I mean as I can afford and as I can physically buy for the risks as I understand them today. Put in place standard things like authentication, dual authentication, encryption. Do not rely on a CSP simply saying my data is encrypted at rest, because my data and your data and someone else's data is sitting on the same system and therefore using the same encryption. Make sure there's a data backup and recovery strategy. Make sure there's a patching and updating process, and make sure that they have some form of IDS or IPS in place. Monitor what goes on with your environment. Understand the baseline of your environment so that you can pick out the anomalies. If suddenly things get slow, is that because my CSP is under a DDoS attack? Review all the defense policies regularly. I have quarterly meetings with some of my customers where we talk about the hosted platforms they use from us and how things like, oh, we've suddenly heard about crack. Oh, we've suddenly heard about the malware that got embedded in a version of CC Cleaner. How does that affect you? How do you deal with that? How do we work with that? Most importantly, don't say, here's how I'm going to make sure I'm not hacked. Just say, here's how I'm trying to prevent being hacked, but the assumption is you will be hacked. So plan for it. Have an incident response team ready. Understand your obligations. Think this is the final time I mention it, but under the current GDPR regulations, the maximum fine if you do not report a breach within 72 hours of it happening is 10 million euro. Make sure you or your CSP have some form of forensics analysis in place, and that you have, under the terms of your contract, access to a root cause analysis process that can allow you to understand the root cause and therefore put in remediation or validation against that root cause. Yeah, you may not be able to remediate all root causes, and life is risky. Sometimes you have to get a risk, you have to take a risk, I should say, but you do have to think about, how can I protect myself against the biggest risks? Do not underestimate user education. Your users know more about your business and the standard processes of your data than you will ever know. They will be able to say, oh, email is running slow today. And if they are able to say email is running slow and there isn't a good reason for it, then you should be thinking, well, maybe something's going on. Am I getting a lot of spam email? Has my email been hacked somehow? Has someone hacked my send and receive connector and is using me to spam other people? So I think the key importance here is make sure the users aren't scared to come forward with queries. Historically in IT, we've been big monolithic monsters that sit in the corner and provide a service. And when a user comes to us, it's sort of like, oh, can I please have something? We're getting into the stage now where the users are probably our best friends in IT. They're the ones that can tell us when things are a little bit amiss. They're the ones who spot the little anomalies before we get the big generic anomaly coming through the monitoring engine. So make sure they're educated and they're on your side. So conclusions. Security best practice in the cloud is actually the same as security best practice on-premise, just a little bit different. Sometimes it's asking other people to do stuff on your behalf rather than doing it yourself. Sometimes it's identifying where you need to do something compared to the old model. I mentioned earlier on the idea of moving your web proxy out to a as-a-service web proxy, so that you're going through the same web proxy with the same policies and procedures, whether the users are originating from your corporate LAN and WAN or using a corporate device from a McDonald's Wi-Fi hotspot or home. Basic principles apply in the cloud as they do on-premise, just with slight variations. As I said, sometimes it's not doing something to keep yourself PCI compliant, but making sure your provider does it on your behalf to keep yourself PCI compliant. Because at the end of the day, it's still you that has to be PCI compliant, not the provider. You need to consider the fact that one day you will probably be breached, and therefore prevention is not enough. Make sure you have the teams, the processes, and the action plans, the run books, whatever you want to call them, in place for the day you are breached. And design cloud-aware, cloud-centric, whatever term you want to use, responses to the same old security problems. Yeah, someone has accidentally got hit by ransomware and therefore we've got a whole pile of encrypted data. Do we A, pay the ransom and hope that they're honest people? Yeah. That will unencrypt our data? Probably not. Or do we B, have a restore procedure that allows us to identify the encrypted files and get them back from a backup? Yeah. You might have had that historically on premise. Do you still have that in the cloud? And is it as effective? So that's been our Let's Talk section today. Hopefully you haven't found it too onerous and, not a hard sell in any way, shape or form. I hope I didn't mention GDPR too much. If anybody wants any more information, please feel free to contact either your Nova School account manager or you can contact me directly. My email address is mal.toner@novaschool.com, or you can get me via Twitter on the hashtag malconfigured. Thank you very much for your time, and hopefully we'll see you in the new year for the next series of Let's Talk webinars.